Title in the next article is Life. I spend a lot of time thinking about the basic needs and desires of human beings and what effect these needs and desires have on society and the vast interrelationships that make up humanity. I point to survival as the number one need of the human race. One significant subset of survival is reproduction, or sex. I argue that since sex plays such a significant role in survival, and since sex is a major portion or driving force behind most or all human interactions, that how we have sexual intercourse plays a fundamental role in our chances of survival as a race. The nature of our intercourse has tremendous influence over all human interactions, and how we interact are the building blocks of society. And society is supposed, and society is supposed to steer itself towards not only survival, but the improvement of the quality of human life. Heterosexual sex is traditionally male dominates female, as is with most species on this planet. From there, philosophers argue that the need for man to attract and dominate females gives motivation for nest building. Nest building gives motivation for competition, and competition gives motivation for society to push forward and improve its chances of survival. Well, I see a whole different picture. What inevitably happens when the drive to compete and succeed is placed in higher importance than morality is that cheaters win. What inevitably happens when cheaters win is that corruption sets in any large organizations such as companies and governments. Finally, what inevitably happens when you have a grouping of corrupt organizations competing against one another is tremendous conflict. We live in a world where we have advanced our technology much more rapidly than our morality. We are living in a world where our governments and our militaries control weapons of mass destruction, and not all who are competing abide by the logic that the outgunned country must give way. Is this scenario really in the best interest of human survival? I argue that the human race is capable of changing its sexual habits and desires. I know this because I know from personal experience that an individual has significant control over his or her desires and habits. I think the solution to the above scenario is to alter the way we traditionally define and have sex. Sexual intercourse amongst men and women should be fairly equal in power, and the lust involved should never exceed the intimacy involved. The reason for this is that we must steer our human race towards greater welfare being a byproduct of loving and caring for one another. Furthermore, we must steer ourselves away from death and destruction, which I will argue is a byproduct of indulgence in lust. So why is it so difficult to imagine men and women greatly desiring and having sexual intercourse in a manner that is of an equal balance of contribution and a love greater than lust tone? Desires change with maturity, and as we mature, we should learn to desire sex that stimulates the awareness of human value, rather than learning to desire sexual habits that dehumanize the participants. What I mean by dehumanize is that the dominated becomes an object of flesh when the level of lust exceeds the level of love in the intercourse. The dominator is dehumanized in the effect that he or she performs a blunt function that is without human value, or void of the essence of lovemaking. Hence, this is the cause behind the generic observation that men are lacking in insight and out of touch with their feminine side, while women are considered by society to be hyper-insightful, over-emotional, or sensitive to social intricacies. In other words, the dominator/dominated sexual roles in society have led to an imbalance of love and human value in the interactions of human beings. These are the roots of corruption. Essentially, what I am saying is that every single one of us has become imbalanced in one way or another. The most common form of imbalance being the male dominator slash female dominated scenario discussed above. See, according to my observations, human beings have strayed from their natural evolution of their sexual instincts. As creature became man, we, the human race, hung on to our ancestors' male dominates female instincts and habits that were so necessary to animalistic survival. Meanwhile, I argue that our intellect had evolved socially and not only allowed for the sexual instinct of lovemaking, but demanded the instinct of lovemaking. As we evolved from creature to man, our sexual needs evolved from animalistic to intimate, but we have not met those needs. To break the argument down, when one sexual partner replaces intimacy with lust, something is lost from his or her self-esteem. When one partner dominates another, the dominated is temporarily transformed from an intimate being with wholesome value into an object of the dominator's lust. The dominator is transformed from an intimate being with wholesome value into an object that performs a blunt function to satisfy the dominated's vanity. Seeing that sex is such a major part of our social and survival needs, how we define and engage in sex determines what rules we set for the interactions of society. If the name of the game is for one partner to dominate the other, and the game is in the nature of lust rather than intimacy, then society's rules set up for cheaters to win and corruption to set in organizations. I argue that all human beings have reached an intellectual level in which we have a need for sex that consists of love and intimacy that overwhelms the level of lust involved. When we stray from this need and have sex that is primarily lustful, the primary imbalance of man dominates woman leads to other more bizarre imbalances. To make the dominated partner an object of the dominator's lust is an act that idolizes and creates demand for the dominated partner's body, which explains why almost everyone tends to be lustfully attracted to females, including other women. There is a high level of intimacy involved in lesbian sex, a sense of sympathy and friendship for more often not being the dominated gender. In gay sex, there are two things going on that I point to. One, the dominated male has developed an unusually high appreciation for vanity and/or sympathizes with the female gender so much so that he becomes the woman, so to speak. He has the developed need to make love to women, but lives in a world that defines heterosexuality as dominant, hardcore sex. Therefore, the nature of his subconscious need to make love to women is in direct conflict with his environment's definition of sex, thus confusing the man and causing homosexual desires. The dominating male has developed a hyper-aggressive desire to dominate and sees another male as an object of lust to be more of a challenge than a female. He has a different solution to the paradox of lovemaking being a need of civilized man and, let me start that sentence over. He has a different solution to the paradox of lovemaking being a need of civilized man and lustful sex being the definition of sex defined by his environment. The dominating male takes great pleasure in dominating this contradiction that is the dominated male because he feels great desire to take control of his disoriented partner and twisted environment. He wants to take pleasure in bringing his lust for the submissive partner to fruition in order to temporarily relieve his confusion caused by the above-mentioned paradox. Just like heterosexual sex, the pleasure from sexual intercourse is due to the dammed-up release of stagnant love. However, there is an extra aspect of guilty pleasure for performing an act of sex that has the additional twist of lusting for the same gender as your own. This twist adds a seemingly harmless, rebellious, and therefore pleasurable nature to the rejection of the paradox of defining sex as male lustfully dominates female in a sexual culture that inherently requires wholesome love for true health. This extra aspect of guilty pleasure explains why bi-curious people have a hard time returning to lustful, heterosexual sex after experiencing homosexual sex. This concept of no longer being satisfied with sexual acts of lesser guilty pleasures also causes anyone that is accustomed to lustful pleasure from easily returning to a sexual lifestyle of true health and wholesome love. When I say that homosexual sex is twisted, I am not singling it out because I claim that lustful heterosexual sex is just as twisted. Lust itself is twisted. Homosexuality is merely a symptom of the disease that is an addiction to lust in a mind that thrives on wholesome love. I argue that all sexual imbalances are due to our superior intellect being constrained by our lustful definition of sexuality existing in a world of men that would prosper in a world of wholesome love. We have evolved to be social beings and are in need of love satisfied, and to stray from the social instinct spells mass disaster. The title of the next article is The Battle Inside.